biosimilars are here to stay. I mean, the technology behind it is globally world acclaimed. And yes, I know that biosimilars have helped to drive down the price and cost of care generally across all therapeutic areas. And the main responsibility to ensure the right kind of biosimilars coming to the country is raised with the regulatory authority, that's NAFDAC. And I must let you know that I'm sure you are aware that, yes, we have biosimilars, but we also have what you call non-comparable, in the case of biologics now, non-comparable biologics. So we have biosimilars who have passed that test and that yardstick as is laid down by the regulatory authorities. They have been able to maybe provide evidence to show their bioequivalence to innovator molecules. But those are in the minority of the biosimilars we have in country today. What we have in many other cases, in majority of cases, what you call non-comparable biologics. So these are about not biosimilars in quotes that have come in riding on the backs of maybe some other biosimilars that have shown evidence to the regulatory authorities and have gained some kind of accreditation. So they just come in and say, okay, which we are. So let's just use paracetamol, for the purpose of this discussion. Mm-hmm. So we have maybe an innovator paracetamol, okay, and then we have a biosimilar paracetamol, okay, and then you now have some other company that also has paracetamol and say, which we are paracetamol, and they come into the country on the backs of that maybe biosimilar paracetamol that has been approved by the regulatory authorities. So those are what we call non-comparable biologics. They are biologics, they bear the name of the biologic, but they have shown no evidence that they have bioequivalent properties, especially when it comes to the pharmacodynamics and the pharmacokinetics and safety for the patient. Those are the ones that predominate the biosimilar market. And unfortunately, somehow the existing laws permit them to be marketed directly, sometimes even to the consumer or directly to the prescriber, even though they have not passed through, the requirements even to be enlisted as biosimilars. So those are the challenges which I would like to highlight, and which I would think that we as a healthcare community need to be aware of and need to be conscious of and need to address. So innovator drugs, Roche produces innovator drugs, that's fine. And we are comfortable really with the idea of biosimilars coming on board to improve access. However, for every innovator drug produced, there's a rigorous process that spans a period of about 10 to 15 years. For every biosimilar that comes, so after that innovator drug is produced, we have about 10 years of what we call exclusivity, okay? After which the patency expires and then biosimilars are allowed to market. Now, biosimilars is also supposed to go through about 3 to 5 years of regulatory process approval, riding on the 10 years of the innovator molecule. That we support and that we are aligned with. What we do not appreciate is some other biosimilars coming on board with no process whatsoever, apart from just that marketing authority to sell. No evidence generation, no evidence of safety presented, no evidence of bioequivalence presented. Just because I'm also paracetamol, like the others are paracetamol, I can sell. And it's unfortunate that the laws of the land allow for such molecules to be marketed to the prescriber and to the consumer. And I think that's where we need to look into. But honestly, the idea of biosimilars, if they follow due process, is a very welcome development because it expands access and improves coverage. As much as possible. So the first thing that came up in the question was the idea of parallel imports, right? Where people are able to bring, even in this case, Roche products into the country, trying to capitalize on maybe the price differences. that may exist from country to country. So I need to first lay that premise that sometimes price differences exist because somebody in the other country is subsidizing the cost of care. So you have I'll use paracetamol again for the purpose of this discussion. You have a paracetamol being produced by Roche in Nigeria and have it being produced by Roche in Pakistan. And then you would have maybe the government in Pakistan or some other third party in Pakistan paying or subsidizing the cost of the paracetamol. And paracetamol is now sold for 10 naira in Nigeria, but it's sold for the equivalent of 5 naira or 6 naira in Pakistan. And because of that, somebody wants to capitalize on that to bring in that same Roche paracetamol from Pakistan into Nigeria. That's the concept of parallel imports. So sounds like a smart economic move or a smart business move, depending on who is making the decision, whether the patient or the doctor or the distributor or the vendor. But like you have already highlighted, in the case of biologics, it might not be the smartest of moves because biologics are proteins. They are not just chemicals. They're actually proteins, almost like they should be treated like they are living things. The case in point will be the vaccines for the COVID vaccines that we have around today. We know that some of them have to be stored at minus 60 degrees or minus 80 degrees. Some of them can be stored in the fridge, or maybe say minus 4 degrees, and then maybe after first use in the fridge. So we have different rules for storing them, and that's because of the kind of stability required for them to remain potent and active. So imagine that drug or that vaccine that was supposed to have been stored at minus 6 degrees and it's kept in your freezer, which is just minus 4 degrees. And then on top of that, PHCN decides to show, or you have to move it from one place to another in some container that does not have that facility to maintain. There's no way that protein activity is retained or preserved. So parallel import shoots itself in the foot when it comes to biologics. Roche is we have a Roche against parallel imports, which is actively, especially Roche Africa, which is actively working with these other countries, Pakistan, India, China, those other countries, Turkey, where those parallel imports usually coming from. And they say, you know what, let's work together and let's make sure that the patients in Africa receive that ideal drug that will benefit them. It doesn't make any sense if those are trying to bypass the process just to save a few bucks. And then the patient, who is the end user, does not benefit from that drug. Then it is a loss at the end of the day. It's only the business person in between, the middlemen that are making money. The patient is losing out completely because he's spending a lot of money and still not getting the 100% results or impact from his spending. So that is going on as Roche. And like again, I mentioned, there's no day we will not talk about the consortium, because this problem of parallel import doesn't only apply to Roche, doesn't only apply to biologics. It's a problem that cuts across the pharmaceutical industry. So unless we start working on that pharmaceutical consortium, when we all, come together, maintain a common front, collaborate with the government and with some NGOs, and maybe even with customs and some other governmental agencies, to make sure that parallel imports becomes a thing of the past. I must also mention that doctors, prescribers are guilty of this. They would, travel and then have an extra suitcase filled with packs of drugs that they are planning to come and sell to their patients. I mean, this thing sounds like a smart business move, but at the end of the day, patients are the ones losing out for it. So doctors, the NMA need to come on board, and we need to come and say, you know what, even if it means the NMA insisting on some discounts for patients just to discourage parallel imports. That can be arranged, that can be discussed. But all hands must come on there, because it doesn't make a doctor look good if you are prescribing the so-called expensive medication and your patient is not doing well. It almost sounds as if the prescriber doesn't know what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. Unfortunately, the product he's prescribing has not gone through the quality processes and quality checks that are required, and patients are not benefiting from it. So,
concerning parallel importation, every organization frowns at that because it brings about unhealthy competition out there. When you have when you know the standard of the product you're bringing in, and someone else imports something different and substandard anyways. So we have NAFDAC there, and all our products, I must say, are being regulated by, or have been regulated and are still being regulated by NAFDAC. And also, we have reputable organizations that we work with that so far they've recorded success stories when it comes to our products.
In terms of side effect reporting, we have a rule Roche that enforces that whether I'm listening to the news or I'm reading newspaper or I'm in a conversation at the bar and somebody refers to a Roche product and an unanticipated effect it had on a patient, we have a rule that we must report it within 24 hours, 24 business hours. Okay. So it doesn't matter whether I heard it on the road or in church, or I heard it in the while discussing with my mother. As long as it's an unanticipated, unexpected effect, I must report it. And that culture is what we preach and what we practice. And I believe that should be the practice among other pharmaceutical companies too. That helps us to gather this intelligence about what our drugs is doing, or what our drugs are doing, apart from what we expect the drugs to do amongst our patients. And that information helps us to, first and foremost, understand our molecule better, update our leaflets, patient information leaflets, and also to work with the prescribers better to know what we need to do to help their practice so that they are able to help the patients.
We encourage pharma to issue out, encourage the patients to make sure they record, all the caregivers and the healthcare professionals, the doctors, to also help us with the feedback, the side effects, so that we can also as well communicate to our partners, the companies we partner with over there, so that in the next batch of production they would look into that and bring in something more comfortable or conducive, I may say, for the patients, or the body accepts better. So pharmacovigilance and regulations we have in the country have been of good help. Thank you. Talking about manufacturing in Nigeria, everyone would jump at it because it lowers the cost of whatever it is, the cost of consumables in the country. Now, you made mention of the government. If the government creates an enabling environment, definitely my company and my organization is ready to start the manufacturing here. That way the cost is reduced for the patients, and then accessibility would also be improved. However, we are still trying to do something with our partners out there, people manufacturing, so that they reduce the cost for us, that when it comes into the country, we'll have the patients will have better access and reduced cost as well. Then if the government on its own can reduce the cost placed on the charges placed on these goods coming in, because these patients actually pay a lot every month just to get these drugs. If the government can reduce the charges on these products coming in, it would also go a long way to encourage to improve accessibility.
Local manufacturing is the way to go. And the ideal situation would warrant that even multinationals should have local plants, within the sub-region or within the continent or within the country, and to make access better and to make the cost of treatment lower. However, there are so many factors that are beyond the manufacturer that have to be put into consideration. I remember in the distant past, some 30 years ago, Roche had a plant in Lagos towards that, is it Dokpemu area. But for economic reasons, they had to close down and, sell that plant to a sister company because of a lot of factors that were not under their control. So when multinationals come in like that, we need an enabling environment to be able to have a sustainable process in place for manufacturing of these products so that the patients can have it, number one, easily and also at the lowest possible cost. So yes, it's the way to go, but it doesn't depend on the manufacturers alone. It largely depends on the enabling environment that the government provides, really.